Welcome everyone to this session on faith and COVID-19, the role of faith actors in the Mali response. My name is Maya Assaf Horstmeyer, Peacebuilding and Conflict Sensitivity Director at World Vision International, and I will be moderating today's session together with Hannah Moutawi, Regional Desk Officer for the West Africa region at Islamic Relief Worldwide. This session aims to provide attendees with insights and learning around the crucial role of faith leaders in building social cohesion during the COVID-19 response, specifically in the most fragile areas in Mali. The main objectives of the session will be to first, highlight the role of faith leaders in Mali in social cohesion efforts, particularly in light of the COVID-19 response. Second, to provide examples and evidence of how dialogue with different faith leaders can mitigate the impact of COVID-19 and directly contribute to the recovery and resilience process. And third, provide examples of how to engage with local level communications and media to deliver unifying messages and contribute towards raising awareness about COVID-19 while fostering community cohesion. Both Hannah and myself will be moderating the session today with inputs from a number of speakers as follows. We will first speak to Azza Karam, Secretary General for Religions for Peace, who will tell us what she thinks about the potential role of faith leaders in peace building in the current Mali context, as well as the COVID-19 context. We will then talk to two of our staff, Moussa Traoré, Country Director of Islamic Relief in Mali, and Josué Djire, Faith and Development Advisor for World Vision in Mali, about the role of faith leaders in the Mali crisis, with a particular focus on the COVID-19 response. We will then hear from Imam Mamadou Traoré, Head of the Interreligious Council in Mali for the Well-being of Children, on his own experience with the COVID response as a faith leader, as well as his work with leaders of other faiths. And last but not least, we will listen to two stories of hope from both Islamic Relief and World Vision about the role of faith leaders in the COVID-19 response. I will now hand over to my colleague from Islamic Relief, Hannah, who will give us a background on the current conflict and the COVID-19 context in Mali before we hear from our speakers. Hannah, over to you.
Thanks, Maya. So ahead of the discussions to be presented today, I'm going to give a quick overview of key issues in the current context of Mali and the context that COVID-19 takes place in for those that might not be familiar, including how COVID-19 has impacted already existing vulnerabilities in spheres that are relevant for our discussion. So overall, just to start, firstly, overall, since last year, we have seen a rapid increase in the numbers of those in need of urgent humanitarian assistance in Mali. And to present this in terms of scale, so in 2019, the HRP placed 3.9 million people in need of urgent assistance. At the start of 2020, this became 4.3 million people. And then in August this year, a review of the current situation that took into account the impacts of COVID-19 placed 6.8 million people in need of urgent assistance. And that's a 58% increase in 2020 alone as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and other exacerbating factors. And in unpacking the context and giving a bit more of a foundation for the discussion that we'll have today, we can focus on a few key areas. So firstly, ongoing conflict and the dynamics that are present within Mali. The numbers of displacement or numbers of displaced people in Mali are reaching levels that haven't been seen since the 2012 crisis. And currently we can see the spread of COVID largely concentrated within conflict impacted regions. And it's important that any discussion on the pandemic in country takes into account conflict dynamics, which due to the particular vulnerabilities of conflict impacted communities and the ways in which it is increasing their needs and also has the potential to increase tensions between groups. The conflict dynamics in the center and the north of the country are complex and require particular individualized analyses. But when we look at the community level, amongst those that are most impacted, we can see that basic services and resources, in particular land and water disputes, are the main drivers of intercommunal conflict. And relations between host communities, IDPs, and returnee groups from various studies that have taken place are generally peaceful and characterized by solidarity. Amongst these groups, particularly access to basic wash services is critically low, as well as knowledge on COVID-19 and how to best protect against the spread. In terms of the key impacts of COVID on the humanitarian situation, with regards to food security and livelihoods, we know that this year in Mali, the lean season was already forecasted to be deteriorated as a result of the combination of factors stemming from conflict and climate change. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated this situation and has placed or resulted in a higher than previously forecasted caseload with communities in deepened levels of food insecurity this year. Data that is coming out is also highlighting that COVID-19 has had a significant impact on income of large groups of people, and it will continue to have impact on food access and ability of households to meet their non-food needs. With regards to protection, we'll touch on that more later on in our conversation, but we do know that in Mali, in particular, women and children have been impacted heavily by the pandemic and are facing increased protection risks. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to our colleagues in Mali. So Josue and Musa, do you have any reflections on the deteriorated situation and the impacts of COVID-19 on the humanitarian landscape in Mali that you can share with us, particularly one or two key examples from the targeted communities that you work in? Josue or Musa, over to you for a couple of examples.
Sorry, Hannah. Couple of examples on COVID impact.
COVID impact. So how you've seen the impact of COVID-19 on the humanitarian situation?
Yes, thank you. I'm Musa Traore. I am Mali country director. The pandemic COVID-19 has really impacted community lives, ultra-poor community lives in the country. In fact, with the outbreak of this pandemic, some population livelihood means has been impacted. You know, the traffic between Mali and other countries were stopped for a while due to COVID-19. So people working in the informal sector, namely women, were not able to have access to their product they used to buy from abroad and to sell them on the market. Consequently, we witnessed the increase of price of those products in the market, which goes beyond the purchasing power of poor communities, putting them in a critical situation, notably in food insecurity situation. So this is another impact of this pandemic in country was related to children. You know, during the pandemic, the school has been closed for a while. And children was not in a position to go to school. They have to stay at home. And this situation put them in a risk of protection because some of them leave their home to go to mining gold to look for a small income in order to come and support their families. So girls also were doing the same, putting them at the risk of violence. You know, the domestic girls are the one helping ladies at home. So they are in front of the risk, but they are the one going to the market to purchase goods or food items for the families, while they are not protected at all. They don't have any protection measure. This situation affected also this group of girls. Mm-hmm. So globally, this is effects that we witness following the outbreak of the pandemic.
Thanks, Musa.
Please, I just want to add two more points. Mm-hmm. And the first I wanted to mention is that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, all of our interventions in communities were stopped for around 4 months. This is so critical, okay? Because according to the measurement proposed by the government, we were not allowed to gather people for meetings or for training. This was very, very critical, and this is a situation. But right now we are trying to restart again. And the second point that I want to add is, formally we have the situation, security situation. Considering this and the COVID-19 situation, so the economically, in terms of security, so things were really going critically. And we can say that the pandemic of COVID-19 with all the security issues and all the struggle we have in the midst, in the central of Mali. So things were very, very destroyed. This is clear, yeah.
Thanks, Josue. So thank you both. These points will be really relevant for the discussion that we have later on as well. So yes, over to you, Maya, for the next section.
Thank you very much for that, Hannah. I will now turn to Professor Azza Karam, the Secretary General of Religions for Peace, and I will ask her that question. Azza, what do you see the potential role of faith leaders in peace building and social cohesion in the current Mali context, and also with the simultaneous COVID-19 crisis?
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, one and all. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to share a few thoughts with you here today. My name is Azza Karam, and I have the distinct privilege to serve Religions for Peace International. And in case you haven't heard about it, Religions for Peace is the United Nations of Religions. Just like the United Nations has member governments or states, Religions for Peace has member religious institutions. All religious institutions from around the world of all religions. And just like the UN has country presence, at least its operational entities do, Religions for Peace also has country presence in 90 countries and 6 regions. Each of those country presences are inter-religious councils made up of the religious leaders representing the religious institutions and faith communities in their own countries. Religions for Peace has existed for 50 years. What has it been doing? It's been bringing together religious leaders to serve their countries, their nations, their communities together. We know, all of us, that religious organizations, religious NGOs, and religious institutions are first responders in all humanitarian crises, natural and man-made. The data, the evidence is there to make that case 1,000 times over. Now, religious institutions are playing a role that perhaps many of them have not had to consider for some years. In addition to being humanitarian first responders, In addition to being development actors, in addition to being foreign policy advisors, and sometimes even holding portfolios in government ministries, religious leaders or faith leaders today are being appealed to, perhaps more than ever in our own memory. Before COVID struck, we were worried, some of us, and concerned about the politicization of religion and about the instrumentalization of religion. I think, ironically, COVID has given us an opportunity to see how religious institutions and faith leaders in particular are being appealed to by so many people, more than ever. Why? Because COVID has come on top of so many other crises and disasters: financial, political, economic, environmental. And COVID has added a layer of public health crises, education challenges, and yet another financial series of crippling dynamics. It is multiple layers of insecurity, which means that actually there's multiple attempts to try to find security, to try to get a sense that this world is not going absolutely crazy and that there is a divine presence that loves us or cares for us or looks after us or will love us or care for us or look after us. COVID is showing the limits of the human nature and human capacity. It is also, therefore, making us appeal to that which we consider powerful, secure, safe, perhaps for many also dependable. And I think that's precisely when religious leaders and faith leaders come into the picture. And when I speak about faith leaders, I'm also including traditional leaders. I'm including indigenous peoples and their leadership and their faiths. The fact of the matter is that apart from being first responders for the development and the humanitarian work that needs to be done and is being done, faith leaders today are the first responders for those of us looking for security, looking for spirituality, rediscovering the uncertainty and the certainty of the love of the divine. Nowhere more so than in countries where the amount of challenges was already so intense. Religions for Peace created the Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund for a reason. The reason is not because religions or institutions and actors are not already active first responders in humanitarian disasters around the world. Not because they are sometimes the only recourse for people in need of all kind in countries where conflicts and disagreements and troubles between communities have been the norm. The reason is that religious actors have to work together. You know what? It's not enough to give for each religious institution, to give 100, 200% on its own. It is not enough. COVID is teaching us that it is absolutely necessary for all faith leaders and their institutions to work together, in spite of the differences, because of the differences, because we're all confronted by exactly the same disease, which is not distinguishing between us. So why are religious leaders and faith leaders distinguishing between one another and between their institutions? COVID equals the time for all partnerships to happen. COVID equals the time when religious actors, institutions, leaders, NGOs have to work together. Not just have to work and deliver, but they have to work together. And that's precisely where the Mali will set an example. The Mali case will set an example, is setting an example, and other countries as well. It is not enough to work alone, no matter how much is being given and dedicated by any one religious institution. It is absolutely imperative to work together. Thank you.
Azza, I would like to thank you very much for this very inspiring little speech that you gave us. And now, without further ado, I think we're going to open it up for dialogue with our colleagues from Mali. Moussa Traore, Country Director, and Josué Gire, Faith and Development Advisor. Hannah, would you like to kick us off with a question for Moussa?
Yeah, I think it would be good to start with Moussa. If you could give us some information on the groups of people that have been hardest hit in the communities that Islamic Relief works in, and how, as a faith-based organization, you've responded to these challenges, including who you've partnered with to make sure you reach these community members.
Okay, thank you. Following the COVID-19, Islamic Relief Mali is identified in its area of operation vulnerable groups, including IDPs, elderly, domestic helpers, people working in the informal sector, namely women who are selling or working in restaurants. So within IR zone, such as Bamako and Kati, where World Vision is also operating, the pandemic created expensiveness and scarcity of commodities due to the fact that, as I reported previously, traffic was suspended between countries. This has created price inflation, which was beyond poor rich. Because of the pandemic, an increase of the cash loads of people in food insecurity was noticed in the our operation zone. Farmers were not in a position to conduct as expected their livelihood activities.
And those people most impacted?
Then they were put into food insecurity. In response, IR Mali, in its operations, namely in Pulmararos, northern Mali, provided food assistance to the affected people, namely internally displaced people and elderly people. We also provided them with COVID-19 wash kits in order to comply with the prevention, such as the promotion of hygiene. Then we also conducted some sensitization sessions with support of health workers and religious leaders in that regard to reach the maximum of the community. We have using local communication measure like local radio. At national level, we have used television, and also flyers has been provided to those leaders who at their return continue conducting sanitation session. They also have been provided with individual protection equipment, personal protective equipment.
Okay.
So to reach all those, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Moussa. I
To
think
reach all those groups, yeah.
Sorry, I think there's a delay on our line. No, thanks, Moussa. It's what you've described has given an insight into.
Okay. Hello? Hello?
Sorry, Moussa. I think there's a connection issue between us. No, that's useful for us to hear. And especially it's interesting to hear that you've, or valuable for our conversation, that you've involved faith leaders within the IR programming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is great. Josue, given what Musa has shared, and I know that both World Vision and Islamic Relief have been using a project approach or a programming approach called Channels of Hope, specifically targeted to work on faith leaders with different developmental issues. I'm wondering, Josue, like given the protection issues now that are exacerbated by COVID-19, do you feel that this methodology is now more important than ever?
Thank you, Maya, for this question. And I'm very excited what we are calling or discussing about COH methodology. And you know, as the COVID-19 pandemic came in Mali and in partnership with the GCM, the first thing what I have done was to translate all the COVID-19 material in terms of COH methodology, to translate all this material into French, because we cannot really reach faith leaders in our text, Francophone context, with material in English. It's not possible. So the first thing I did was to translate the material into French. And with this translated material, so we organized the first facilitator training, okay, with Muslim leaders and Christian leaders, with some key staff also. And it was a very, very important point. I have facilitated the session with Imam Mamadou Traoré together. So World Vision have organized this training. And we can see and really to say that the methodology allowed discovering of different people from different faith perspectives. So, and to come together to discuss what our scriptures are saying about the pandemic or some disease situation, and reflect together to find ways how we can protect our community members. So it was very, very exciting to know that. So I can confirm here, really, the methodology is relevant, very relevant, because it governs us to reflect together, okay, on the pandemic as COVID-19 pandemic in Mali. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Josue. Maybe it would be good for, it would be interesting to hear from you and Musa together on the interfaith work that you've been conducting during COVID-19, and how, maybe in a bit more detail, these initiatives are contributing to social cohesion efforts.
Yeah, go ahead, Musa, yes.
Okay, yeah. So thank you. In the context of COVID, of course, Islamic Relief and World Vision conducted interfaith activities together. So in Bamako, in the circle of Kati. So the activity mainly includes radio awareness session on COVID prevention and protection measure compliance. So both IR Mali and World Vision conducted awareness session and radio awareness session on the promotion of promotion of social cohesion. In fact, the way the two institutions, faith-based organizations, work together, we can say that it really contributed to social cohesion in a way that it has enabled Muslim and Christian to collaborate, okay, and people in the same communities, saying Muslim organization and Islam organization discussing, conducting session within the same community, really it breaks the barrier and bring the hope that the two organizations can really contribute to strengthen the social cohesion within the communities we are operating in. This really gave this hope to those communities. Previously, prior to that, we were not familiar with such kind of dual intervention. But since we have seen, we found that there is no barrier for Christians and Muslims to discuss social issues, sensitive issues together. Specifically, we were referring to the Holy Scriptures in both sides.
So thank you for the floor. And I want to first say about the interfaith approach, what we have started implementing with Islamic relief here in Mali. As you know, when we have started this collaboration here in Mali, we have signed what we called a memorandum of understanding together. And the most point was, for all common activities, we want to do all these activities in interfaith way. What do we call interfaith way? So meaning, when we are gathering Christian and Muslim together to facilitate activities, so we need to have Christian facilitators and Muslim facilitators, because to explain what the Quran is saying about the protection issues or the gender issues, any Christian, even you are pastor, you cannot say or talk in the right way. So the meaning is for a Muslim facilitator to come and to explain, particularly the principles guiding. And we have started this point together, and we have done it during our common activities on the ground in the 10 villages when we have implemented the COA child protection together. It was very, very wonderful to see Christian and Muslim facilitating a session together. And the population, the community members were so excited saying that how Christian in World Vision and Muslim in Islamic relief, how they can come together and to facilitate the same church session using the principal guides through biblical references or Quranic references. This is some point very well which can bring people to see that so for common problematic in our communities, Christian and Muslim can work together. First point. The second point, what I want to mention is around what we have started to going on COVID-19. You know, when we have organized the first facilitator training in Mali, it was in Bamako. We have gathered Muslim and the Christian together, and then after we going on the ground. All the workshop we have done right now. We have done workshop in Tombouctou. We have done it in Gao. We have done it in Koro. We have done it in San. We have done it in Kati. Okay? We have done it in Bamako also. So all these workshops are doing in interfaith approach. Never, I say never, according to what we are understanding about interfaith approach, never, we cannot implement or facilitate an activity alone without a Muslim facilitator. We cannot. And this is the right way we are using now. And to relate it to the peace building issue, I was so excited 2 weeks ago when I was in Tombouctou, facilitating COH COVID-19 with Imam Seydou Baraji. During a time of testimonies, a pastor stand up and say, "This is my first time here in Tombouctou to see Christian and Muslim staying together in the same room for 3 days, discussing about a common topic without problem. He was so excited. Maybe he will come on tear when he was saying about. And the point was, I wanted to say it in French because it's beautiful to say it in French, but let me try in English. During our stay in Tombouctou, I was with Imam Baradi. We went to pay visit to all the pastors in the town, and then we went to pay visit to the great Imam in Tombouctou, Ben Assauti, to say that Christian and Muslim, we can bring our competencies, okay, together to handle a common problematic in our community. So really, so I'm so excited when I'm talking about, but it was very important. Thank you.
This is great. That's a great testimony to share. Thanks a lot for that, both Musa and Josue. And now I'm going to have Hannah introduce Imam Mamadou Traoré and take us to him. Over to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Maya. So earlier in the week, Musa and Josue, you met Imam Mamadou Traoré. So he's the head of the Interreligious Council for the Wellbeing of Children in Mali. And we had some key questions for him with regards to the role of faith leaders during COVID-19 in Mali. So firstly, we asked him to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on community members and who is most affected and why. Secondly, we asked him to look into and discuss with us some of the challenges that he has faced and the members of his council has faced as faith leaders during the pandemic, particularly within communities affected by conflict in Mali. And we also looked into or asked him about any particular interfaith initiatives in Mali during COVID-19 that have helped communities cope with the pandemic, and for him to share any stories of hope that he has.
Donc, effectivement, le COVID-19 a eu beaucoup d'impact sur notre communauté. Depuis l'annonce de la maladie, de la pandémie, les gens ont pris peur. D'autres même ont déserté les lieux de culte. Et la population paniquée se sont acharnés à s'approvisionner dans les denrées alimentaires. Donc, c'est ce qui a fait que les prix ont augmenté à tous les niveaux. Donc, il a fallu que les leaders s'organisent pour prendre contact avec les commerçants pour qu'ils puissent voir, sinon le peuple est paniqué. Donc, au niveau de notre congrégation religieuse, on a fait beaucoup de contacts, beaucoup de réunions pour pouvoir faire face. Donc, c'est pour cela que le Haut Conseil islamique du Mali a tenu plusieurs réunions. Il a même appelé les médecins pour qu'ils viennent nous expliquer qu'est-ce que c'est que le coronavirus. Donc, depuis là, on a commencé à prendre des contacts. Donc, on a pris les initiatives à sensibiliser les gens. Donc, au niveau des mosquées, au niveau de nos zawiyas, les lieux de culte, et après chaque prière, on se donnait la main, on se serrait la main après les doigts. Donc, on a demandé d'arrêter ça et on a demandé aux gens de respecter les mesures dictées par le ministère de la Santé. Donc, c'est ça qui a fait qu'il n'y a pas eu beaucoup de problèmes au niveau des mosquées. Mais ce qui est la fermeture des mosquées, on n'a pas pu se mettre d'accord sur ça. Parce que ces jours-là où on faisait la réunion, on n'a pas annoncé un cas au Mali. Jusqu'au 25 mars, le premier cas a été annoncé. Donc, les gens ont commencé à respecter au moins le lavage des mains et le port des masques. Donc, après nous, on a eu quelques formations. D'abord avec Islamic Relève. On a fait une formation de 2 jours, les leaders religieux, les leaders communautaires. Donc, après ça, on a augmenté notre sensibilisation. On a contacté les jeunes, on a contacté les femmes pour qu'ensemble, on puisse s'impliquer dans la sensibilisation pour que la pandémie-là, on peut le booster de notre pays. Donc, après, on a eu d'autres formations, musulmans et chrétiens avec World Vision, donc de 2 jours. Ça aussi, ça a renforcé la capacité des leaders musulmans et chrétiens. Donc, les gens étaient venus de partout du Mali. Donc, après leur retour, on a fait un plan d'action de sensibilisation et pour que la pandémie ou bien le coronavirus ne soit pas attrapé au niveau des lieux de culte. Donc, on a dégagé des voies et moyens pour qu'on puisse donner notre contribution. Donc, ça a été un grand espoir. Les 2 formations qu'on a eues, l'un avec l'Islamic Relief, l'autre avec World Vision, ça nous a renforcé la capacité et ça nous a aidés. Donc, même d'autres qui ne croyaient pas à la pandémie, depuis que les imams ont commencé à discuter de ça, au niveau de la télévision nationale, au niveau des radios privées, au niveau des chaînes de télévision privées, donc les gens ont commencé vraiment à prendre ça au sérieux. Puisqu'on en discutait seulement au niveau des mosquées. Mais depuis qu'on a commencé les émissions à la télévision, à la radio, donc, et ça a été diffusé à maintes reprises. Tu vois sur les plateaux un musulman, un imam et un médecin. Donc, ils sont en train de discuter de ça. Qu'est-ce que l'islam a dit? Qu'est-ce que le christianisme a dit? Et les médecins donnent l'avis médical. Donc, ensemble, on a pu faire ce que vous voyez maintenant. Mais jusqu'à présent, il y a des gens qui ne croient pas. Mais l'espoir est permis. L'espoir est permis. Inch'Allah, on va continuer nos sensibilisations jusqu'à ce que on dégage notre pays de cette maladie.
Thank you very much, Hannah, for taking us through that and also facilitating the talk with Imam Traore. Hannah, I know that as part of this dialogue, both World Vision and Islamic Relief have a call to action. I think it would be great to hear from you what that call to action is moving forward. Over to you.
Yeah, I think as we've seen in the discussions that we've had today, faith leaders and faith partners, as we've got on the screen now, as you can see, they have a unique and essential role to play in protecting communities during COVID-19 and in terms of social cohesion and peace building work and looking at the health impacts of the pandemic. And in terms of the first call to action that we have, we recommend that UN agencies and NGOs collaborate with local faith leaders and communities to develop messages, promote healthy behaviors and practices, and encourage adaptation of religious rituals and rites to protect communities from COVID-19, with collaboration ensuring active involvement of women and youth, given that as a result of the pandemic, they are facing particular gender and age-related challenges in a conflict context in particular.
Yeah. Another call for action is to support both the interfaith and the intrafaith collaboration that is transformative in response and that builds peace and social cohesion between communities, addresses fear, stigma, and false information, and combats xenophobia in the midst of the pandemic. And then last but not least, we call to use a faith-based approach to bridge the gap between the primary impact and the inextricably linked secondary impact COVID programming. So basically that means to integrate programming that focuses on the primary health impacts of COVID-19 with programming that addresses other issues like exacerbated protection issues, particularly for women and children. Thank you. And Hannah, I know you had one last question for Josue and Musa today before we end this dialogue.
Yes. Josue and Musa, can you each please share with us a story of hope from your community on the role of faith in combating the pandemic?
Okay, I can talk about I hope. Really, what I am going to report is a feeling or a statement from one participant during awareness session meeting. So the participants reported that hygiene, if ever, hygiene is a means of breaking the chain of contamination of the pandemic. He said that they believe, as believers, that the pandemic will no longer last in country because hygiene was already part of the practice as recommended by the Holy Scriptures. So, and from this statement, so we can have the hope that believers, Muslims and Christians, can stand as one, given already in their holy scriptures, promotion of hygiene is playing a big role. So that's what I wanted to report here, that we can keep hope that the pandemic can be tackled and based on faith-based, with faith-based approach. I mean,
Hannah, I want to add a short point. It is very, very relevant. I'm talking about a pastor. His name is Pastor Gabriel Jara. Pastor Gabriel Jara is now a pastor working with the Evangelical Church in Mali, but specifically in a Kati area. Pastor Gabriel Jara has been trained as COVID-19 facilitator. And since this training, he is so committed to sensitization activities in his church, in his community. I want just to read what he has sent to me. He said that it was a privilege for me to attend the training organized by World Vision on COVID-19. The training has been held at the time when there were many questions about the pandemic. What should be my role as pastor? I understood that I have a role to play in my family, in the church that I lead, and in the community where I live. I also understood that I had to help my colleague pastor to have the same understanding and prepare them to serve the communities in turn. In my own family, we have the following measures: the complete hand washing kit at the front door. Anyone entering and leaving re-enter must wash his or her hands before touching anything inside the house. This has become an habit for children who educate their kids who come home to wash their hands first. For the church, we also have 4 complete kits for hand washing, and a washable mask has been given to all worshippers. Awareness activity has been done and it continues to be done in the church since we still have strangers. Every Sunday, the worshippers wash their hands and wear their mask before taking their places in the church. In addition to that, community members do the same for their various meetings. For colleague pastors and church committee, a restitution was made of the training received and its importance. World Vision supported us, me and one imam, to engage sensitization activity within our communities. By God's grace, we have touched more than 400 faith and community leaders. In my neighborhoods, I personally undertake the sensitization of neighbors on barrier measure by going from house to house. This is from Pastor Gabriel Jara, working in Kati area. He is the pastor of Evangelical Church. So means there is hope. It is an hidden hero for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josue and Musa. So I'll hand it to Maya now to close the session.
Thank you very much, Hannah, for co-leading the session. It was a pleasure being with you. Thank you very much, Musa Traore, for your insights and experience. And thank you very much, Josue, as well, for those stories and for the inspiring stories that you shared with us. I'd also like to thank Ashley Lovett, who is with us on the call and who has done a lot of work behind the scenes to make this happen. So thank you, Ashley. And I also want to thank our speakers who appeared with us on video today again, Azza Karam and Imam Traore, for sharing their insights and spending enough time with us today. Thank you all, and I hope you enjoyed this session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.